They tied her and her daughter, burned the cabin, then rode off, until a silent rider appeared on the ridge. The sun rose slow and golden over the New Mexico territory, washing the canyon in warm, muted light. A breeze stirred the yellow grasses, bending them in waves, soft as breath. Morning birds called from crooked trees, their song light and careless, unaware of the trouble edging close. Down in a hollow, tucked beneath the weather-worn bluff, sat a modest cabin of stone and timber, its slanted roof patched with tar paper, its porch sagging but clean. Smoke curled from the chimney in a lazy ribbon. It smelled of eggs and sage. Inside, Clara Hollis stirred a pot over the iron stove, her back straight despite the years of hard living carved into her bones. Her hair was pulled into a neat bun. She had her mother's posture, her father's grit, and none of the softness life had once promised. Her daughter, Ellie, sat at the table with her legs swinging, humming quietly as she drew something on scrap paper. 7 years old and already wiser than most men Clara had ever known. "You finish your letters?" Clara asked, not turning from a stove. Ellie held up her drawing proudly. "It's us. And Papa." Clara paused, spoon suspended in midair. She turned slowly. You remembered his eyes right. "He always smiled with them," Ellie said. Clara looked away quickly, back to the bubbling pot. "Eat now. We've got the goats to check and the fence by the east trails sagging again." They ate in silence, the easy kind born of deep understanding. Clara had carved this life out of the land with blistered hands and raw hope. It was hard, but it was theirs, and in that moment it was safe. Then came the hoofbeats. At first, they were distant, mere thunder murmurs behind the ridges. But Clara's hand froze around her spoon. She knew that sound. Not ranchers. Not traders. Too many. Too fast. She stepped quickly to the door, rifle in hand, and looked out. 5 riders, dust-choked and mean-eyed. They moved in loose formation, like wolves who'd already caught scent. Leading them was a man in a black duster, his hat low, mouth twisted in a permanent sneer, Bo Kane. Clara's stomach turned. She hadn't seen him in years, but there was no mistaking that face. Her husband had put a bullet in Bo's arm once, stopping a train robbery near Santa Rosa. The gang got away, but Bo never forgot. She turned to Ellie. "Under the floorboard. Now." "But, don't argue." Ellie obeyed, lifting the loose board beneath the rug and crawling into the dark. Clara covered it just as the gang reached the porch. Bo didn't knock. He kicked the door open with the heel of his boot and stepped in like he owned the air. "Well, I'll be," he drawled, glancing around. "If it ain't Clara Hollis." Still breathing. Clara didn't lift the rifle. "Not yet. You're not welcome here." Bo grinned. "Ain't about welcome. It's about unfinished business. You got your answer years ago. That was from your husband." Bo stepped closer. "Now I want what he was hiding. You know where it is." "There was nothing," Clara said, voice low. Bo backhanded her hard enough to send her to the floor. The rifle skidded across the planks. Clara wiped the blood from her lip, eyes burning. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. The rest of the Kane riders spilled in, rough men with stained clothes and colder eyes. They tore through the house, upending chairs, smashing shelves. One of them shouted, "Ain't nothing here, Bo." "Then she's lying." He grabbed Clara by the arm, dragging her outside. "Bring the girl." The floorboard came up. Ellie screamed. Clara fought like a wildcat, but fists and boots did their work. They tied her to the post behind the cabin with coarse rope, Ellie beside her, both mouths gagged. Bo looked down at them with something like satisfaction. "Ain't personal," he said. "Just long memory." He nodded once. One of his men poured lamp oil around the porch, splashing it onto the walls. Clara thrashed, eyes wide. Ellie whimpered against the gag. Bo struck a match. "World forgets quick, Clara. But I don't." The flame caught fast, climbing the dry timber like it knew the way. Within seconds, the cabin roared, smoke turning the morning dark. The heat rolled over them, stealing breath, and the smell, burned wood, charred earth, oil and smoke and death, wrapped around them like a shroud. The Kane riders mounted up and rode off, their laughter swallowed by the wind. Far above, On a ridge cut into the sky, a lone figure sat atop a pale horse. He wore no badge, no colors, just dust and silence. His face was shadowed beneath a low brim. He watched the smoke curl from the cabin, his gloved hand resting on the saddle horn, unmoving. Below, flames consumed everything Clara had built. Her screams were lost in the crackle. Ellie's body slumped. The wind shifted just enough. The rider turned his horse without a sound and disappeared into the canyons. The fire took everything. When the smoke finally thinned and the flames curled into cinders, the wind swept silence over the blackened ruin of the Hollis homestead. The cabin, once so carefully built with love and sweat, was now a skeleton of char and ash. Clara Hollis lay slumped against the scorched post where she had been tied, her skin blistered at the edges, her breath shallow, throat raw from smoke. The gag had slipped from her mouth, damp with soot and tears. Her body had stopped fighting hours ago, yet something inside her refused to surrender. Beside her, Ellie was still. Clara turned her head slowly, muscles trembling. Ellie's small chest no longer moved. Her face was gray, lips parted slightly, as though caught between crying and sleep. There was no cry, no breath, no warmth. Clara let out a sound that had no shape. It was not a scream, not a sob, only the raw sound of something breaking for the last time. She rocked against the ropes, twisting her wrists against the coarse fibers until skin tore. Her fingers reached, desperate, fumbling toward a sliver of metal beneath the ashes. A rusted horseshoe, jagged from the fire, lay half buried at the edge of the blackened dirt. She strained toward it, inch by inch, pain blooming with every movement. Her fingers found it. She worked it against the rope in sawing motions, biting her lip until it bled. Minutes passed, maybe hours. Eventually, the rope frayed, snapped, and she fell forward into the dirt. The world tilted, cracked, and spun. But Clara rose. She gathered Ellie in her arms. The child weighed nothing. She carried her across the yard, past the smoldering remains of the barn, to the gnarled cottonwood tree near the dry streambed. Its lower branches were scorched, its leaves blackened, but the roots held. Clara dug with her bare hands, scraping through dirt and ash until her nails bled. She laid Ellie gently into the earth, wrapped in her shawl, and pressed her lips to the girl's brow. Then she covered her, trembling with each handful of soil. No prayer passed her lips, no words, only silence and the whistle of wind through the burnt grass. 3 days later, Clara stumbled into the edge of a town called Dry Hollow, a crooked scar of buildings hugging the desert road like they were ashamed to be seen. Her clothes hung off her like rags, face burned and streaked with dust, hair caked with soot. She looked like a ghost walking. A boy spotted her near the watering trough and screamed. Within minutes, a handful of townsfolk gathered, some with hands on pistols, others with only wide, wary eyes. Clara said one name, Beaucain. That changed the air. An older man in a brown vest stepped forward, his badge barely catching the morning light. Sheriff Thad Keller, a man more rust than iron, with sunken cheeks and eyes that flinched before trouble even arrived. He helped her into the shade of the saloon, gave her a cup of water, and listened as she spoke in a voice rough as gravel. She told him everything, what Beaucain did, what she saw, what she lost. Her words were spare, but her eyes said more than any sermon ever could. When she was done, Keller leaned back, cleared his throat, and stared at his boots. "I'm mighty sorry, Miss Hollis," he said. "I truly am." She stared at him. "Then do something." His lips twisted, but nothing came out for a moment. Finally, Beaucain's got half the territory scared stiff. He's got men, and horses, and firepower. The governor tried sending a marshal after him once. Fella ended up dead and hung on a church bell. Clara leaned forward. "So that's it. They burn, kill, and walk free. I can't risk this town. These folks got families. If we stir the hornet's nest—" "I had a family," she hissed. Keller's shoulders slumped. He offered her a cot at the livery and a plate of stew from the boarding house. "Rest a while. Heal. There's nothing more to do now." Clara said nothing, but her eyes, hollow, steady, didn't blink. She stayed 3 days. Each night, she sat alone behind the livery, staring into the dark, her hands clenched around nothing. The town whispered. They pitied her, feared her. Some avoided her eyes when they passed. Others offered quiet condolences, which Clara neither accepted nor rejected. They didn't understand. On the fourth morning, she was gone. The stable boy found the cot empty, the wool blanket folded. No horse was taken, no food packed. Just a single blackened stone left on the wooden floor, taken from the remains of her cabin. She'd walked out into the desert on foot, leaving everything but her grief behind. That night, as the wind shifted and stars emerged over Dry Hollow, a ranch hand camped near the edge of the old trail swore he saw a figure on the ridge above the burned Hollis place. A rider, alone, motionless as the stone around him. The horse was pale. The man wore a long coat and a wide hat that hid his face. He didn't move. He didn't speak. By the time the ranch hand blinked, the rider was gone. Only the sound of the wind remained, whispering through the hills, and the smell of smoke. The wind carried stories in the frontier, half-lies, quarter-truths, things overheard in saloons and whispered on porches when the sun dipped behind the canyon walls. But some stories never faded, only shifted in form. One name had no name, just a title passed from tongue to tongue, the Silent Rider. No one knew where he came from, or what law he answered to. He spoke to no one, rode alone, appeared in places where justice had failed, too late to save, just soon enough to haunt. Folks in Dry Hollow had heard the rumors. Some believed, some scoffed, but none laughed when the wind turned strange and the horizon seemed to lean just slightly wrong. Out near the Whitestone Crossing, a trapper found a spiral carved into a juniper tree. Clean, deep, deliberate. A week later, the outpost was burned, and the two brothers who'd terrorized a wagon train were found face down in the ash, not shot, just stopped. Now the spiral had returned. Jonas Finch saw it first. A blacksmith by trade, but a man who had once known war. He found the symbol gouged into the outer wall of his workshop, just above the iron brand he used to mark finished rifles. The wood was fresh, cut that same morning. Finch traced the spiral with a calloused finger, his brow furrowing. He turned slowly as Clara Hollis entered the shop, her boots heavy with grit, her shadow long in the early light. She wore a man's duster now, the sleeves rolled, her hair tucked under a wide-brimmed hat. The horse she tied out front was one she'd broken herself, raw-boned, quick-eyed. Like her. Jonas said nothing. Clara laid a rifle on the bench. I need a short stock. Light pull. Fast chamber. Jonas stared at the rifle, then at her. You're not hunting game. No. He nodded once, like he already knew. You'll need a scope. I still have that modified sharps you liked. I want the canyon map too. The old routes. Where no one rides anymore. Jonas hesitated. What you're asking? They killed my daughter, Jonas. That stopped him. He said nothing more, just turned, unlocked a drawer, and pulled out a map rolled in oilcloth. As he handed it over, he asked quietly, You planning to go alone? I already did, she said, eyes hard. Now I'm coming back. Miles away, across a canyon twisted like a coiled snake. Bo Kane and his gang were drinking deep and riding high, hidden in a place called Widow's Pocket, with a rock wall swallowed sound and sight. They passed a bottle around the fire. Bo sat with his boots up, hat tipped back, a grin spread wide beneath his crooked nose. That smoke show back at the Hollis place, he said. That was a message. Ain't no man or marshal gonna come sniffing now. The others laughed. Grease Hand, the youngest, tossed kindling into the fire with giddy hands. What's next, Bo? Bo pulled a folded paper from his coat. A payroll ledger, marked with train schedules. Southern Pacific. 3 days from now. Heaviest shipment in 3 months. They're expecting no trouble. They wrong, muttered Deke, the grizzled lookout with one good eye. Bo raised the bottle. We hit it clean, take what's ours, and ride south till snow melts. No more towns. No more names. But just beyond the camp, etched into a flat rock near the sleeping horses, was a spiral. New. Unseen. The next night, Clara slept beneath a rock shelf, watching stars blink in the cold sky. She traced routes on the map, her fingers moving with calm precision. Each canyon, each dry creek bed, each animal path burned into memory. She had no plan for mercy, only exactness. But she was not the only one riding. The silent rider had been seen again, briefly, by a shepherd east of Dry Hollow. The man said he stood still in the dusk, near the broken fence where Clara's husband once traded cattle. Left no footprints, just a carved spiral in the fence post. The pattern was spreading. By the fourth day, Clara returned to Jonas to pick up the rifle. He placed it gently on the counter. Walnut stock, balanced weight, scope fitted low. She handled it like a familiar ache. Jonas hesitated. "You sure this is the path?" "I buried my child in ash." He looked down, hand resting near the spiral carved on his wall. "I've seen this before," he said slowly. "War camps, scorched settlements. Back then, it was the mark of Elias Ward." Clara froze. "Ward's dead, hung by marshals after he killed 2 rangers." Jonas shook his head. That was the story, but his body was never claimed. No name on a grave, just disappeared. He nodded to the symbol. It's his doing. Always left it behind when he acted. Back then, he killed for gold. But now, he trailed off. Clara's voice was tight. "Now what?" Jonas met her eyes. "Now he's not after justice. He's after redemption." Clara left without another word, the rifle strapped to her back, her horse eager under her. She didn't know what redemption meant to a man like Elias Ward, if it was even real. But if he was alive, and if he was watching, then perhaps fate had more work yet to do. She would find Beaucain, alone if need be. End it. Whatever came next, mercy or madness, she'd face it with both hands steady. And somewhere far off, in the narrow throat of Widow's Gorge, the silent rider paused his horse. The night wind moved his coat. He reached for his blade and carved a new spiral into the stone, then turned his mount toward the dark. The reckoning was near. And this time, he would not be silent forever. The sun hadn't yet risen, but Widow's Gorge was already awake. Wind slithered between the high, rust-colored walls, carrying the scent of dry brush and stone. The narrow pass twisted like a noose through the mesas, its floor wide enough for a wagon and 2 riders, no more. Long shadows hung like specters, and the canyon swallowed sound whole, as if the land itself didn't want to be part of what was about to happen. The cane riders waited behind a jagged outcrop, rifles across their laps, nerves hidden behind grimy grins. 6 of them now. Greasehand picked at his nails with a knife. Deke chewed a bit of jerky with the rhythm of a ticking clock, and Beaucain sat tall on a crate, staring into the throat of the gorge like it owed him something. Their plan was simple. Hit the payroll convoy at the narrowest bend, take the cash, leave no witnesses. Beaucain cracked his knuckles and grinned. "Right here," he said, pointing to a bend marked on a dusty map. "We don't wait. We end it fast. No mistakes. No speeches." A crow screamed overhead. Ominous. Or just noise. But somewhere, watching from above, someone else was already moving. Clara lay on her stomach at the rim of the gorge, pressed low against the stone. The air was cold and thin, her hands steady despite it. She wore earth-colored cloth, blending into the rock like she was carved from it. The modified Sharp's rifle rested against her shoulder, scope catching the first pale gleam of light. From up here, she could see the entire bend of the trail, the cane riders tucked into their hiding place like rats. Her gaze narrowed. No twitch of nerves, no second thoughts. She counted them, waited, timed their movements against the gusts of wind, so they wouldn't hear the shifting of her boots as she moved from ledge to ledge. Everything was planned. Every escape route, every ricochet risk. She knew where the sun would be when the wagon arrived, and how far the canyon would carry the sound of her shot. She'd spent days preparing. The trail was already salted with broken branches and misaligned rocks, quiet traps designed to break confidence and footing. Clara had no illusions about this being revenge. It was duty, something owed, and then movement, a figure, stepping into her periphery. Silent, broad-shouldered, familiar. She turned the rifle on him instantly, finger tight on the trigger. He didn't flinch. The silent rider stood just 10 feet away, his pale horse left behind, his coat moving in the wind like a flag in mourning. She rose, the barrel still aimed at his chest. "You watched," she spat. Her voice trembled, not with fear, but with the weight of words finally breaking free. "You watched them burn my home. You saw her die." The man stood still, shadowed beneath his brim. "I wasn't there for her," he said. His voice was low, gravel and grief. "But I'm here now. For them." Something shifted in Clara's chest. Not forgiveness, not even understanding, but recognition. She lowered the rifle. "You have a name?" "Elias Ward." It hit her like a stone to the ribs. Her knees almost buckled. "Ward? Elias, you were with them." He nodded once. "I rode with Bo Kane. Years back. Before I knew what he was. Before I knew what I was becoming." Clara stepped back. "You don't get to rewrite it. My sister, Mary, she died because of your gang. Because of you." Elias's eyes lifted slowly. They were pale and empty, but there was something beneath, deep and trembling. "She was the only good thing I ever touched. When she died, I rode into silence. Swore I wouldn't speak again until I made it right." "Why now?" He looked to the gorge. "Because you're here, and they're below, and it's time." Clara stood still, her breath sharp. Then she nodded once. Together, they crouched over the canyon ledge, laying out the final strokes of a quiet war. The convoy came at dawn, a wagon drawn by 2 strong bays, flanked by 3 riders in railway gray. They entered the canyon slowly, the lead scout scanning the rocks. Clara watched from her perch. Elias disappeared behind a pillar of stone, already in place. Clara gave one signal, 2 fingers raised, then folded. What followed wasn't war. It wasn't even clean. It was dust and echo and fury. As the wagon reached the center of the bend, the canyon let out a sound like thunder. A blast echoed, small, controlled, from a set charge Elias had rigged earlier on the far slope. It dislodged nothing dangerous, but the noise made the cane riders flinch, horses rearing. That's when Clara fired. Her first shot struck Deke through the shoulder, spinning him out of the saddle. Before the others could react, Elias dropped from a low ledge, firing once, clean and silent. Greasehand fell with a gurgled shout. Bo Kane roared, "It's a trap. Fan out." He kicked his horse forward, drawing twin revolvers, trying to find cover. The other outlaws scattered in confusion, pinned between echoes and shadows. The canyon worked against them. Sounds bounced in every direction. Shapes moved behind stone. No clear enemy. No pattern. A shot rang out from the far ridge. Elias again. Another cane rider crumpled. One of the railroad men lay dead, but the others rallied, taking cover beside the wagon and returning fire. Bo Kane dismounted and ducked behind an outcrop, his eyes burning with rage. "It's her," he growled. "She's alive." He moved fast, flanking wide, circling up toward the ledge, where Clara had first fired. Clara's position had gone cold. She was already moving, climbing down the canyon edge, ducking between ledges. She reached Elias behind a boulder, reloading his carbine with bloody fingers. "You hit?" she asked. He nodded once, barely. "Bad." Slowed. Not stopped. He winced as he stood, but his grip on the rifle was firm. Clara nodded toward the gorge floor. "Bo's heading high." Elias looked at her. "You want him?" "I need him." Their eyes met. 2 ghosts held together by the thinnest thread of cause. He gave her a single nod. "Go." Then he turned, limping back into the chaos, drawing fire away from her path. Clara reached the ridge, just as Bo Kane crested it, gun drawn. They froze. For a moment, the silence between them was louder than the gunfire below. "Well, look who rose from the ashes," Bo said. Clara didn't answer. She didn't need to. He circled slowly, boots scraping stone. "You think this ends it? Killing me?" he sneered. "You think your girl wakes up because you get your pound of flesh?" Clara stared at him, eyes flat. "She doesn't get to wake up, but neither do you." He fired. She dove left, behind a rock, the bullet sparking against the stone. She returned fire, twice, grazing his leg. He howled, dropped behind cover. Bo's voice came ragged now. "You ain't no soldier, Clara. You're a damn goat farmer with a dead kid and a death wish." You burned everything, she said, moving low and fast. Now I'm the flame. She reached the final ledge, where she'd planted the old crate Jonas had modified. It looked like dynamite. It wasn't. Just clay and old powder smell. Enough to fool a man who didn't want to die. Bo saw it. Panicked. He stepped backward. Wait, don't. Clara aimed. Go to hell, she said, and fired. The bullet hit the crate. There was no explosion, only the crack of her rifle, and Bo Kane stumbling back, off balance, slipping on the gravel. He fell hard, his pistol skittering from his hand. She stepped closer. He was bleeding from the gut now, struggling to breathe. You think this brings peace? He gasped. Clara looked down, her shadow falling across him. Dry Hollow woke to a different wind the morning after the canyon burned. The sun rose over the red mesas with soft light, not harsh for once, as if the land itself had exhaled. There was no thunder of hoofbeats, no dust trails disappearing toward violence. Just quiet, heavy, deep quiet. By the time the sun was fully overhead, a railway scout rode into town, face pale, clothes torn, and told the tale. The Kane riders were gone, dead or scattered. The ambush at Widow's Gorge had failed. Someone had outsmarted them, someone with a rifle and a reason. Within hours, men from town rode out, cautiously approaching the battleground. What they found were 6 graves dug in dry soil, marked only by stacked stones. Bo Kane's body wasn't among them, but blood marked where he'd fallen. No one claimed his gang after that. No one rode with the Kane name again. Sheriff Thad Keller handed in his badge a week later. He said it was time for younger hands, braver hearts. He didn't say Clara's name, but everyone knew. He left Dry Hollow on a wagon bound east. He didn't look back. Clara Hollis returned to what was left of her land. The cabin was still a shell, blackened timbers and sagging ash, but the foundation held. She stood there for a long time the first morning, her boots planted in the dust, the wind tugging gently at the hem of her coat. She didn't cry. Instead, she set to work. At first, she worked alone, hauling beams, clearing rubble, setting stones. But over time, others came. Quiet folk from town, those who'd once crossed the street to avoid her eyes. They brought timber, nails, tools, even food. No one asked questions. No one offered pity. They simply worked. By autumn, the cabin stood again. Stronger, simpler, a new door, new roof, and a porch wide enough for a rocking chair. Clara never replaced a fence around her land. She said if someone meant to cross it, it wouldn't stop them. Ellie's grave sat beneath the old cottonwood, the one tree that survived the fire. Clara carved her daughter's name into a smooth river stone and set it at the head. She didn't add dates, just the name. Each week, without fail, fresh wildflowers appeared at the foot of the grave. Red desert poppies, pale blue asters. No one ever saw who left them. Some said it was Clara. Others whispered different things. Late one night, a ranch hand riding home claimed he saw a pale horse at the edge of the canyon. Its rider knelt beside the grave, then vanished into the dark before the man could call out. He didn't try to follow. He just tipped his hat and rode on. When the town council came offering her the badge Keller had left behind, Clara didn't hesitate. No, she said. That part of me's already done what it needed to. But folks trust you, one of the elders said. You've earned that. Clara only shrugged. I didn't do it for folks. I did it for her. Still, people watched her with different eyes after that. Not fear. Not awe. Something steadier. Respect. She didn't become a lawkeeper. She didn't lead. But when trouble stirred near the edges of town, men found reasons to think twice. And whenever someone new passed through Dry Hollow, they always noticed the silence that came when Clara Hollis walked by. The years rolled forward, slow and red like the desert itself. Children grew up on the stories. They weren't told as facts, but as something older, deeper. Tales passed from porch swings and schoolyard whispers. They said the Kane riders were ended by a woman who burned and didn't break, that she and a man who never spoke lured the devils into their own fire and left only dust behind. They said she was once a rancher, a widow, a mother. But the story that stuck was this, the widow of the ridge. She stood where no one else dared stand. The children whispered beneath blankets by lantern light. She aimed her rifle with grief instead of anger, and she never missed. And always, beside her in the stories, rode a man with no name, the silent rider. Some claimed he was a ghost, sent to right the wrongs he once helped cause. Others said he was a broken man seeking to stitch justice where the law had failed. But the stories agreed on one thing. When the dust turned strange and the wind howled wrong, you might see them again, her on the porch, him on the ridge. And if you had something to answer for, you wouldn't see them twice. One summer, long after the canyon battle faded into rumor, a great thunderstorm rolled in over the dry plains. Rain lashed the roofs of Dry Hollow. Lightning split the sky in crooked veins. And in the middle of it, a child saw him, a tall man on a pale horse, standing at the crest of the ridge above town. He didn't move. He didn't shout. He just watched. The storm curled around him, wind snapping his coat like a warning. The boy blinked, and the ridge was empty. The next morning, a drifter who'd beaten a saloon girl was found unconscious at the edge of town, boots missing, ribs broken, and a spiral etched into the dirt beside him. When asked what happened, he only muttered, didn't speak, just looked at me. He never came back. Clara lived many more years in her cabin by the cottonwood. She grew her garden, raised goats again, and kept the porch swept. She didn't talk about Bocane, or Elias Ward, or the fire. She didn't have to. The land remembered. And in spring, when the wind was just right, folks swore you could hear hooves on the ridge, even when no horse could be seen. No one doubted what it meant. Justice out there waiting. Not in a badge, not in a court, but in a woman with quiet eyes and a rifle over her door, and a man who once rode wrong but never stopped watching the horizon.